Welcome back, and welcome to this session's method instruction. This session will be focusing on one of the oldest and most established methods, mantras. The word mantra itself is so old that it originates with Sanskrit, which is believed to be a language that's somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 years old. So we're talking about a method that's been around in a variety of forms for a very long time. In fact, there's evidence for them going back at least 3,000 years. A mantra is simply a word or a phrase that you repeat over and over again, either silently or out loud. It's that simple. But as you might imagine, there are many different ways that you can do this. And just as with other methods, not all systems of mantras are created equal in terms of helping you to reach fundamental well-being. Despite the many forms of mantras that are out there, fundamentally, and for the most part, they can be classified into roughly two major types. When most people think of mantras, they think of the first type, which is a constant, non-stop repetition of a word or phrase. For example, if the mantra is simply the word one, this would mean repeating it again and again, over and over, silently or aloud, in a continuous and constant way. For example, you would say one, 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 and so on. One reason that this type of mantra is so popular is that it helps many people stop the stream of thoughts that is often passing through their mind. Essentially, it does this by crowding out space for other thoughts to enter. Of course, it doesn't do that forever, because eventually your mind will habituate repeating the phrase and make it more of a background process, leaving plenty of other room for you to think about things while your brain automatically repeats it in the background. So at this point, it becomes more of a focusing exercise, because you have to increasingly focus while you repeat it so that the process isn't just automatically or habitually happening. Well, although that type of mantra is popular and very effective for things like quieting the mind, that is not the type of mantra that showed up in the research as the one that leads most reliably to fundamental well-being. The other type still uses a word or phrase. However, this second way of doing mantras involves a different type of repetition. One way to think about it is to imagine what happens when you throw a rock into a still pond. First, there's a splash wherever the rock lands. Then ripples go out from that spot where the rock landed, and eventually the ripples die down and the pond is still again. That's exactly how you should think of your mind regarding this second type of mantras. When you say the mantra, it's like dropping a stone into a pond. Now, I know in your case, it might not seem like you're dropping it into a completely still pond, but it makes a splash. It has ripples that come out from it, and eventually the effect dissipates. When that happens with this second type of mantra, that's when you say the mantra again and the process repeats. After you say the mantra, you're watching the process it kicks off within you. You're asking yourself things like, what's the effect of the initial splash? What's the effect of the ensuing ripples? When do they end? So it's really a passive process once you say the mantra. So you say the mantra, and you're just watching to see what happens after that. You're simply allowing whatever happens to happen. And when that process stops, whatever it is, then you say the mantra again. In this session, we're going to use a video from an old friend of mine, Dr. Bob Easton. You know him as the physician that I refer to in the Finders book. He was literally research subject number one for our project, and it's unlikely that I would have even seriously considered this population of people to research at the beginning of our well-being quest if it had not been for him, and even specifically for one lunch with him that was kind of a random accidental incident. Of course, you can also say that synchronicities happen, right? The method that transitioned him to fundamental well-being is mantra-based, and it's called Ascension. It's worked for many, many people. As these systems often do, it's got a bit of a language barrier that we're going to have to master. So, for starters, it refers to mantras as attitudes. Now, this change of word is actually very instructive. As you'll see, each phrase can be viewed as an attitude that you're adopting when you say it. But nonetheless, we'll be using the term attitude and not mantra with this system. We'll be learning the first 3 mantras or attitudes in this system, but there are many, many more. Ordinarily, you'd learn these attitudes one at a time, 1 week or more apart. So you'd be given one to practice, and then you'd go and practice it for a week at least, or until you felt that you were ready for the next one, which might be maybe very much longer than a week. And then you'd go back to you'd basically go back to your teacher and you'd get the next attitude, and you'd repeat the process over again. According to the originator of this system, you only really need the first 3 attitudes to transition to fundamental well-being. Of course, as with other methods in the course, we'll only be spending 1 week on this system. So you don't have time to get the first 3 attitudes spaced a week or more apart, and we'll be giving you all 3 today. The attitudes are grouped into what the founder of the system called spheres. Spheres are simply collections of 4 different attitudes. There are quite a few spheres you can learn, and if this system resonates with you, there will be a list of teachers you can contact at the end of the course. For now, just focus on these first 3 attitudes. Many mantras are from foreign and even ancient languages, meaning that we can't understand very easily what it is that we're actually saying, what the meaning is of the words or phrases or whatever that we're repeating. One great thing about Ascension is that most of the attitudes are in English, including all of the ones that we'll be using today. We found that this really helps English speakers to connect more deeply with them, and it's one of the key reasons that we chose this system for the session on mantras, as well as the fact that it's such a highly successful system of mantras for Western English speakers. As with most of the other methods in the program, you want to practice this for at least 1 hour a day. The system's original teacher training lasted for months, and it was in residence. And the teachers trained basically meditating for most of the day using these attitudes. The goal fundamentally was to ensure that every teacher had transitioned to fundamental well-being before they went out into the world to teach. So this is definitely one of those systems for which more is better. You do not have to limit yourself to just an hour of practice. Okay, let's hear from Dr. Bob, and then I'll come back at the end with some final comments.
Well, greetings to each one of you, wherever you are. My name is Bob Easton, and I'm a teacher of a form of meditation called Ascension. It's a mantra-style meditation, meaning that we repeat a phrase and then basically let whatever happens, happen. The purpose of all meditation is to quiet the mind, to allow something that is deeper than the mind to come through into consciousness, to allow something that's within each one of us. Now, you don't have to believe that, but you will experience it if you practice this or some similar type form of meditation. You will experience something deeper than the ordinary state of consciousness coming through, and it's a state of consciousness that is free from compulsive thinking. It's free from the past and the future, and it helps you to enter into the present moment more and more deeply. It's pretty nice. I started this. I'm a retired physician. I had some crises in my life a nasty divorce, financial crises, and other things. And I've heard about this and had never been able to practice meditation successfully, but thought that this might be the venue. And I tried it, and right from the start, I noticed that I could very peacefully enter into an altered state of consciousness, and a very relaxed feeling. And that gradually, as I continued to practice this, a lot of the issues in my life, the things that had been causing stress and discomfort, worked themselves out. Some people left my life, some people entered my life, but the internal discomfort that I had been carrying for years and years seemed to gradually dissolve. And now I'm in a place that's really pretty nice. It's free from, as I say, compulsive thinking, free from the need to manipulate other people, to control anything, and free from fear, which seems to be a bugaboo with many people. Anyway, so we'll get started on this form of meditation. What it basically involves is repeating a phrase, and you say this phrase to yourself. It's not said audibly, and then you basically let whatever happens happen. And then when the energy or the consciousness or the awareness of that phrase is no longer in your mind, you reintroduce it. There are many forms of mantra, and many of them use like a foreign language, sometimes Sanskrit, sometimes other things. And the interesting thing about ascension, and this is also called Ishaya, Ishaya's ascension, if you want to look it up and read a little bit about it, is that it uses English phrases. And it also, the phrase has a particular energy to it where it employs both the thinking or cognitive aspects of the mind and the emotions to help you reach beyond those. And so I'll go ahead and just really start with one of the first attitudes, and we can practice this right now. The idea being is that deep inside of each one of us, there is a state of being that is connected with the infinite, with whatever concept you want to call the infinite, doesn't really matter. But it's deeply connected with that. Unfortunately, it's obscured, and it's obscured by our past conditioning, by unfortunate circumstances that have happened to us in our life. Really, I say unfortunate, but many times it takes unfortunate things to get us to a place where we're willing and we're desirous of going beyond the whole typical kind of thing where you try to make money, make success, make projects, and that's what your life is, and you haven't found this connection that underlies everything. So the seemingly unfortunate things often work to find even a greater treasure within you than any monetary or worldly pleasure or thing can provide. So anyway, we'll start with the idea of ascension is using emotions and a word to reach deeper. And the first ascension attitude, they come in different spheres, and you really don't need to know all about that. It's kind of irrelevant at this point. The first three attitudes have to do with, first, the emotion of praise. And praise is another word for that is just appreciation. If I talk to you and say how much I've appreciated what you've done, or I give you a good energy feeling about what you are in my life, you're more likely to be attracted to me. And also, as we use that energy, we're more likely to go deeper within ourselves. So, and the second part of any attitude is what we call the your concept of the highest good. And that word can vary from time to time. We call that a star word, like an asterisk, because we can substitute one word for another, and you may want to do that depending on your own growth and your own experiences. But you're free to choose whatever word you want to use for that. And right now, we'll have you just kind of close your eyes and go within for a second to see what word you would want to use for your highest concept of the greatest good. And I'll give you some examples that people use. Some people use creation, nature, God, Jesus, Great Spirit. That's a few. And it doesn't really matter what you choose, but you want to have one that is comfortable for you. So we'll have you go within right now and choose that word. Okay, for anybody that hasn't found that word yet, just pause and go within a little longer and then click back on. So assuming you have that word, we're going to start with the first attitude. And the first attitude deals with a universal stress that people feel when they are not connected to this deeper essence within them. And that is basically that something somewhere is wrong with my life. Even if you've been successful in a lot of fields of endeavor, you have a lot of friends, you have a lot of money or whatever, people like to think are the greatest goods. And unless you have this deeper connection, you're kind of considered in the spiritual terms a pauper. So there's a feeling of something is wrong with my life with most people. And this first attitude helps to dispel that. And I'm going to tell you the words right now, and you want to write them down and kind of use these words. We recommend that you don't try to make any modifications of them except in your what we call your star word or your idea of the greatest good. Not so much because we're legalistic or anything, but just because this has been a tried and true method for accessing something deeper. So use your creativity and originality in the star word and keep the other words as we're saying here. So the first attitude has to deal again with breaking or dissolving the stress that something is wrong with my life. And I'll give you the phrase right now, and we'll begin meditating using that in just a few minutes. The phrase is praise whatever your word is, the star word, and I'll just say the universe for my life. That's just that word, just that phrase. Praise the universe for my life. And we're going to say that word, and then we're going to just basically let whatever happens happen. And what this phrase helps to do is to differentiate between whatever your life circumstances are and your real underlying life. Your life circumstances may be pretty good right now. You may have won the lottery, you may have met the right person, all this kind of stuff. Or they may not be so good. It really doesn't matter. What your life is far deeper than anything you have on the outside. And that's what we're penetrating into by using this phrase. So we'll say that phrase right now, and then basically let whatever happens happen. And then when the energy of that phrase is no longer in your consciousness, then reintroduce it. So we'll spend a couple of minutes right now, and it'll be kind of like the waves of the sea coming in. You say the phrase, the wave crashes in. Slowly it comes out, and then you reintroduce it. There's no time sequence that you need to use for how soon you say the phrase again. It could be 1 second, it could be 10 seconds, it could be 2 minutes. There's no prize for saying it more frequently or less frequently. So just feel whatever is comfortable for you, and will allow yourself to go within as we say, praise the universe for my life. So, and your word for you can say whatever phrase you want for the universe instead of the universe. So we'll do that right now. This is an eyes closed meditation. Okay. Now, if I really had folks in front of me right now who were doing that meditation, I'd be asking for feedback on how you did. So maybe you can just give some feedback to yourself right now, and just see how it went. Many people who have tried other forms of meditation have not been so successful at quieting themselves. Now, you may find when you're doing this meditation that sometimes your emotions are very, very smooth, and sometimes they're a little choppy, and sometimes your mind is racing with thoughts, and sometimes it's quieter. And that's all good. What we look at is by saying this phrase, you're getting pulled inward. And then after the phrase is done, things are dissolving from your system. Some deep stresses begin to dissolve. Those may take the forms of vivid memories of the past, some disquieting emotions just moving through. And if you can just be the observer of all of that, that's the successful way of dissolving all of these past traumas and things that are blocking you from what is really your birthright, which is a connection, a deep feeling of oneness. So what we will do now is just repeat that meditation for a minute or so and let you do it again. Again, say the phrase and then let whatever happens happen. The phrase again being praise star for my life. Okay. Now, some unique aspects of this form of meditation, one of them is that there's no particular posture required. You don't have to sit with your spine erect and in a rigid position, and you can even be lying down. You can be slouched. You can kind of assume any position you want, and it's all okay. You want to be comfortable. And one of the main components of this also is that you don't want to have a lot of effort involved. You don't want to be fighting or anything. Any emotion that comes through, just stand back and watch it. You don't have to resolve any issues or discover the answer to anything. If you kind of find yourself going off on a train of thought or on an emotional thing with when you're meditating, you just kind of want to reintroduce the attitude. Just sort of let it go. You don't want to scold yourself for going off on that tangent. You just let it go and then reintroduce the attitude. And again, you get in any position that's really comfortable for you. You do not need to have any special type of breathing when you're doing this form of meditation. I'm kind of used to deep yogic breathing myself, so I usually kind of am pretty slow and deep and rhythmical abdominal breathing. But that isn't necessary, and you don't want to have too much of a focus on your breathing, even if you're doing that. I can kind of do that second nature, so it isn't a big deal. But if it was distracting you from the mantras, you'd kind of want to focus more on the mantras and just let your breathing go. And it's okay if you go to sleep while you're doing this. We don't want to have somebody standing behind you with a whip or something cracking you when they see you dozing off or something. Actually, if you go into a sleep when you're meditating or when you're ascending like this, your quality of your sleep has been shown to be improved. So it's fine to do that. And if your body needs that rest, it needs that rest. So again, nothing with effort should be involved with this. It should be very simple. And if you find yourself efforting, then just stop what you're doing and reintroduce the attitude. If you find yourself going off on a tangent and thinking about what you're going to do tomorrow, what happened yesterday, or some recent emotionally charged thing in your life, that's okay. You don't want to beat yourself or say, "Oh, I'm not focusing. I'm not there." No, you just when you realize you're doing this, when you wake up, then you reintroduce the attitude and just keep going. So it's basically all good. So that's the first attitude. And if we were here in a session that would last over a weekend, we would just practice on this attitude for a few hours, actually, and then just get your feedback. But we have a little different time schedule now, so I'm going to give you the second attitude. And you can do one attitude for a period of time, and then you can do the second attitude. It's really up to you what kind of time period you allot to each attitude. The second attitude has the energy of gratitude, thankfulness, and we start with the phrase. I'll just give it to you now. Thank, and then your star word. I'll just say the word universe, and the word that's used next is kind of the Sanskrit equivalent of something that is outside of your consciousness. And the Sanskrit phrase would have to do with both your physical form, your body, and the entire world outside of you. So we say thank the universe for my body-world. And the purpose of this attitude is to become more grateful for the things in your life, for your physical form. It may not be the nicest, it may not be the, in my case, it's not the youngest, but it's all right. And the more you're grateful for it, actually, the more positively it will respond. And the same with the world. The world kind of gets a little more friendly to you when you're friendly to it. So we will use this phrase, thank the universe for my body world. Now again, we're not focusing on all these things I talked about where you're thinking I've got to think about my body or anything like that. You're using a phrase that gets you deeper inside. So we say this phrase, thank star for my body world. And then we let whatever happens happen. So we'll do that now for a few minutes. Okay. Again, if you were if there were an audience right here, I'd be asking about how was your experience? And it's nice to kind of reflect that to yourself. About this form of meditation, I can't prove it to you that it will work for you. You'll have to prove it to yourself. There's no way that I can give you scientific studies that show that people that do it are more relaxed, their focus is better, they can think more clearly and all that kind of stuff. But the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and the only way you'll really know that this works is by doing it. And it may come a time when you don't feel a need to meditate anymore, and that's fine too. This is not something to get you involved in as a cult kind of thing that you've got to do so much for the rest of your life, something like that. No, it's a vehicle to help you access a deeper state within you. And once you've accessed that, sometimes the tools fall away, just like when you reach the far shore, you no longer need the boat. So that's the second attitude. And the third attitude has to do with love. And love is sometimes the most misused or misunderstood emotion and feeling. Usually it has to do with wanting and attraction rather than something from a deep, heart-centered feeling. And that's because, unfortunately, sometimes in our culture, we're dominated by people who have been controlled by their minds and their emotions and have not accessed a state where they no longer need anything. So this is an attempt, not an attempt, it's a vehicle of getting to that stage. And it starts with the word, with your star word first. And we use the star word, we'll say the universe. And the first word is the universe loves me. And hopefully that energy of that will help dispel any notions that we have picked up, and it's very easy to pick those up in our culture, both from our parents, where we're taught conditional love, that they love us as long as we're not violating 5,000 rules they have, and by the churches which say God loves you, but He's going to send you to eternal hell if you don't follow what He wants you to do, and that kind of stuff. No, the infinite within us is unconditional love. And the deeper we can realize that, the more liberated we will be. So we use that phrase, and then again, let whatever happens, happen. We'll say the phrase, the universe loves me. Very simple. Now, incidentally, I would suggest that you have written these down, and you may need from time to time, until they're stored in your memory a little better, to look at the phrase, look at what you've written down, to remember what to say, particularly if there's a lot of emotions moving through you and you're almost forgetting what you're doing. So keep that handy, and so we'll do that right now. We're going to say the universe, or whatever your star word is, loves me. And then we let whatever happens happen. We'll do that for a few minutes now. Again, if you were here, we'd be doing it for much longer periods, but you can make those periods longer by pushing the pause and making them longer. So. Okay, so now we're going to just talk a little bit about what how the mechanics of practicing this again, you will feel some difference almost certainly, and you will know if this is a good vehicle for you. Some people know it right away, and some people, they try it for 30 days and they doesn't seem to faze them. So there's something else for you. There's no only one way. So try this for a period of time and see if it's for you. And if you want to go into it with more attitudes, the kind of thing that happens as you're meditating is sometimes the mind likes to kind of creep back in, and you start doing these things mechanically, and you start kind of there's some religions that repeat things over and over, certain prayers. You don't want to quite get in that mode. You want to have some freshness to it and some uniqueness. And sometimes it helps to have more attitudes. Sometimes some of the mantra style meditations only have one phrase that they give you, or maybe in 10, 15 years they give you a second phrase or something. But there's many phrases available in this, and they're all really very beautiful and interesting tools to help you access your birthright, your deeper state of connectedness to the infinite, to the all that is. So anyway, I congratulate each one of you for embarking on this course. You're really helping to heal our planet. You're really going to be delighted in your own life, and you're going to be of a great assistance to other people. And I honor you and salute you and send my love to you.
Thank you, Dr. Bob. Okay, let's cover a few additional points that the video didn't. First, it's okay to change your star word at any time, even while you're in the middle of practicing. A new star word may pop into your mind at any time that seems like a better fit than your current one. And if that happens, you can feel free to start using it right away. The attitudes have words like praise, thank, and love in them. People often wonder if they should be feeling praise or feeling thanks or feeling love when they say it. Although it's not strictly necessary, the system does seem to work better when you do that, or at least when you're open to it arising when you say the phrase. I think this is one of the reasons that the founder renamed the mantras to attitudes. When you use one, it's best to adopt an attitude of praise, or an attitude of thanks, or an attitude of love, and so on. Having said that, this is not strictly required, and if you just want to say the phrase, you can. If you have difficulty feeling praise or thanks or love, it's no big deal. Just say the phrase and let whatever happens happen. Remember that this system is supposed to be effortless. You don't want to find yourself straining or pushing in any way. Also, in being open to what happens during or after saying the phrase, be aware that there might be quite a bit of variation. You might experience times with high emotion or times with no emotion, for example. Whatever happens, just know that it's what's right for you right now. Just watch it and let it unfold. Try to avoid any expectations about what will happen during the process of using Ascension. You want to approach each repetition of every attitude from an open and fresh perspective. When Dr. Bob talks about saying an attitude and no longer being immersed in the quote-unquote energy of it, then saying it again, that might seem a little confusing to you. What does he mean by the quote-unquote energy of it? Well, really what he means is sort of the feel of it. But I asked him about this, and I asked him if he would clarify it. And he said that, that's a good point. Energy could be a little confusing. It's just sort of his own internal word for it and how he feels things and whatnot. And that certainly people's experiences are going to vary. And he actually used it as a moment to stress that there really is no wrong way to do Ascension. But that in general, you do want to just say the phrase and then let whatever happens happen. He stressed that you definitely do not want to be mechanistic about it, as you would with the other type of mantras. Rather than you just saying the phrase over and over and over again, you say the phrase and then you pause. And it's that pause and in that pause that many times will allow the magic of this process to happen. He also stressed that you don't want to have a specific time frame regarding how soon you're going to repeat an attitude again. For example, you don't want to just do them mechanically every 2 seconds or something like that. He said, some people may feel very, very peaceful, for example, and just know that in that peace, there's a feeling or a vibe from that attitude that still seems to be with them. And so there's no need in a circumstance like that for them to repeat it until that fades, until that vibe or that feeling that was produced by the attitude fades, dissolves, goes away, however you want to think about it, even if it lasts for quite a while. He always stressed that there is no right or wrong way, no right or wrong time frame, as long as you're following the general guidelines. It just depends on what works for you and what you seem to be needing at the time. Another thing people often ask is how to use the attitudes with each other. Should you just focus on one initially for a few days and then another one the few days after that? Or should you rotate through them? Or should you do something else? There are many ways to practice this method. As I mentioned, if you were to participate in this practice outside of the course, you'd get a new attitude every so often. Generally, you'd practice just that attitude for anywhere from a day to a week on its own, and then you would incorporate it into a rotation with the other attitudes that you had previously received. That rotation could be using the first attitude one time and then moving to the next. It could be using each attitude many times before moving on, or some other variation. Because you're getting the first 3 mantras at once, it's up to you regarding how you incorporate them into your practice. You can use 1 phrase per day, 2 phrases each day, or all 3 phrases each day, and frankly, that's the most common way. If you use all 3 phrases each day, as is most common, it's important to use them in order. You can say each one once and then move on to the next one, or you can say each one several times before moving on to the next one. You don't have to have this exact same number of times for each one if you're doing that. You can also start back over at the first one and then start doing, the first one again after you've done the third one, and so on. Again, you want to make sure that you're going in order. And so if you decide to loop through them, you want to keep that same order. It's a good idea to experiment and see what works best for you. As we always say, experiment and follow your intuition. As you go through this session, you may get a certain feel, quote unquote, for each of the attitudes. What I mean by this is very simple. When you say an attitude, you'll probably notice that it feels a certain way to say it. Now, maybe that won't happen initially, but probably it will happen for you at some point. Something that you can try, if that does happen to you, towards the end of the session, when you've become more familiar with the feel of each attitude, is saying the attitude once or twice to remind yourself of its feel, and then dropping the phrase entirely and just trying to generate the feel of the attitude alone. You literally use the feel of it as the mantra that you're doing. In other words, you try to generate the feeling of a given attitude instead of saying the phrase. Let go of it just as if you'd said the phrase and then stopped saying it. So you generate the feeling and then just let go of it. And then you watch and see what happens. When whatever has happened, whatever it's produced has faded, then you generate the feel again and repeat the process. Some people find this to be much more powerful because it eliminates the use of language. But again, it's not something that you want to do early in the session. You want to do it only towards the later part of the session when you're very familiar with how each one of these feel. Okay, that's it for this session's method instruction. Enjoy, and I'll see you next time.